Okay, welcome. I'm Joanne Vaughn. I'm the Executive Director of Maryland Federation of Art, and I want to welcome you to another Well Talk. Tonight we have, I think, our first married art couple, Emil and Angela Petruncio. Angela is a mixed media artist and assemblage artist, and she actually started MFA's Found Object exhibition that we hold every other year called Eye of the Beholder. Emil is a career Navy officer, taught oceanography at the U.S. Naval Academy, and has now become a digital photographer exhibiting his own work. So I want you to sit back and listen to this couple talk about art and life with our favorite art historian, Will Scott.
Thank you, Joanne. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I've always been interested in Angela's art. She was part of the MFA before I joined and started to exhibit my work, and I think it's really fascinating. And then Emil joined in a little more recently, and as a photographer, I, of course, am naturally inclined in seeing what Emil is doing as a photographer, and he takes a different approach than I do. So that's interesting too. It gives me another way of looking at our shared medium. So thank you both for participating. I should also say that they're very, very nice people and very easy to talk to. So I'm looking forward to that too. For me, being married for quite some time to a woman who was in a completely different field from my own, I think perhaps like many other people, it's interesting to think of a couple sort of working in the same field and how that affects their work and their life in general. Is this a competitive situation, a nurturing situation? You do your thing, I'll do mine, and let's not talk about it. So, Angela, why don't we start with you, because you were already there and then Emil retired and decided to join in. So take it from there.
Well, to be perfectly frank, we really don't have many conflicts as far as our artistic endeavors. The best part of it is that his work is so 100% different from mine. Being an assemblage artist, I pretty much take over the whole house with all of this stuff that I collect to put in my pieces. And poor Emil, well, he's relegated to like an easy chair with his phone in his hand. And that's what he does most of his work on, is his phone. And he doesn't mind that at all, thank God, because if we were both assemblage artists, I think it might get a little strained, you know, but because we both do very different things.
I could imagine if you were both assemblage artists, there would be that midnight sneaking into somebody else's stash of materials.
Don't you dare!
Yeah. Is that one of your pieces hanging on the wall behind Emil?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay. Now, just having that to look at and having what you just said about taking over the whole house, what kind of workspace do you have and where is all of the stuff? Because you can't go out and look at it every time you think you have another project, right?
That's true. You got to have labels and lots of boxes and drawers and shelves and things like that. And so the majority of my raw material is down in the basement, and that serves as part of my studio where I do a lot of the larger things. If I need a lot of elbow room to work, I will go down there to do it. The majority of my small work gets done up here in what I call the study-o versus studio, because it's both a study and an art studio. It's where Emil has his main computer and he teaches Anne Arundel Community College courses there now, everything online. And so I sit at my little table and the room is absolutely packed with all kinds of drawer things to put my stuff in. And so I have the smaller things upstairs and the larger work goes on.
So where do you find these things? Do you have sort of a standard operating procedure? You go here, you go there because you know you found good stuff before, or is it just catch as catch can?
If you talk to other assemblage artists, they will tell you that we're just always on the lookout. And that's part of the process, is seeing things that stimulate your imagination. And you can find them everywhere. You don't have to go to a junk shop, although I adore junk shops. I appreciate it when they are honest enough to say, this is a junk shop.
Yeah.
You go into an antique store, you know you're going to pay at least a
Exactly.
50% markup for the
Right.
same thing. But I get a lot of things from friends. Oh my gosh. And so many people in MFA have supported me. When they find out what I do, they send me an email and say, hey, I was cleaning out my closet here. You know, I've got all this good stuff. And it's just wonderful. It helps with interacting with other people. And we tell stories. They tell me stories about things that they're giving me, you know, like this was a Christmas ornament from when I was 5 years old or something, you know, and I can't believe these people are wanting to give them up.
Yes, so that's great because you get these things that sometimes come with a story. They're not just the thing.
They already have
but
a
they come with a story. Well, that's really interesting. And I want to loop back to how you create your work when we get to the slides and maybe a little bit before that. But let's give Emil some time on the floor to address that question about what's the relationship like. And again, having been married for a while, I know I've boxed you into a corner because Angela's already spoken. So, you know.
I know you mentioned nurturing as one of the options, and I think that's a great description. I've been really lucky because Angela's also got a background in photography, and from her days in University of New Mexico, and then the Air Force. And so she's made some helpful suggestions on some of the work that I've done in terms of, oh, maybe too much shadow here. We're going to bring out a little bit more detail there. And she's allowed me to make some suggestions on some of her works, just on some of Aegis comes into mind, this collage or assemblage she made of some natural objects. And so, yeah, there's some give and take. I know when I'm out of my depth in trying to make a suggestion for some of her work that, you know, only she's got this vision, and it's very unique. And but no, I think I think we support each other and energize each other in pursuing our different approaches.
I just have to interject. I'm sorry. I just have to give him some props here. My gosh, this guy, before he was ever involved with MFA, he was always there helping me with shows. Anytime I had to do anything, he was there to do the heavy lifting, and it's great.
Well, it's great to see that you have such a collaborative and supportive relationship. And I would just have one question and one anecdote. Are there any sort of unspoken boundaries, like you don't comment unless asked, or something along those lines, whether you've said that to one another, let's do this, or whether it's just sort of unspoken?
It's unspoken, but well understood.
Yeah. Well, and the little anecdote is a personal one of mine. I like to ask my wife, you know, if I have something that I have just printed, I'll often show it to her, because she does come at it from a whole different point of view. And just the other day I did that, and she said, well, it's okay. and of course I understood what she meant. And I said, well, you know, I kind of like it. And her response was along the lines of, well, then what did you ask me for?
Yeah, no, I fully realize when I'm looking for Angela's input that sometimes somebody doesn't see the same thing you do, and others may. I also take, you know, feedback from my sharing on social media with a grain of salt. Sometimes I get a lot of accolades for a piece, but then other times they're quiet about something that I really like, and I stick with that anyway. So yeah, you take the input, but you can't take it personally or.
So I think you both would probably agree with me we're artists, we have some vision of what we're trying to accomplish through our work, and that's what's more important. Comments are welcome, but they don't necessarily deflect you from that vision.
Yeah, yeah, and I think our work is an assemblage, if you will, of all of our influences in our life. So I think we're providing input on each other's work unconsciously sometimes.
Well, let's stick with you for another moment, Emil, and use that as a segue. How did you decide, since you have advanced degrees in oceanography and you've been a university professor, et cetera, how did you decide that you wanted to give so much time and thought and energy to photography?
Well, it's I've always been interested in the visual arts. I'm going back to I've always been picking away at it, sketching, drawing in high school just for fun, and then in my 20s, 30s, when I had a steadier hand, I was working on Ukrainian Easter eggs, the pisanki, which are highly, a lot of emphasis on geometric shapes.
Yeah.
And then I've always enjoyed taking photos. I got a little bit more serious after a trip to Russia and Ukraine when I was at the National War College. There was a group of us, and I was taking photos back then that I thought maybe would look good on a postcard and not with a real photographer's eye. And one of my classmates was in the same area also taking photos. She's in the State Department, and they were so much more artistic. And I started to think, yeah, I've got to open my eyes and look a little bit more at what's in front of me and see the shapes and lighting. And that kind of spurred me on to get a little bit more serious with photography.
But you've never had any kind of formal coursework or mentorship or anything like that?
No, I haven't. Just keeping my eyes open for good lighting and interesting subjects. And then it started getting more abstract as a result of filtering cell phone photos to compensate for the poor resolution that was.
Yeah.
For early cell phones were pretty bad, and so I had to filter and smooth, and then started getting very abstract, and that's kind of led me to where I am today.
Yeah, well, I think you're a perfect example, although all of us who are artists are to one degree or another, but you're a more easy to see example of what many of the greatest artists that are most famous through history, at least through Western art, have said, which is that everyone has artistic talent. It's just a matter of sort of releasing it and then giving it some kind of discipline, structure, order, so that you can realize it, you can share it, you can communicate it. Anyway, I think it's really exciting that somebody like you comes at this point in life and then takes off and creates the exciting kind of art you do. But Angela, now you have the formal cred and credentials and all of that kind of stuff. So how did you come to be an assemblage artist, sort of the high points along the way?
For a long time, growing up, going through school, I was trying to figure out what it was I was really good at. And it seemed like photography was a good avenue for me. My dad had a wonderful old 35mm camera, and he taught me how to use it. And then I began to do photography when I was in high school, and then decided that that was what I wanted to get my degree in fine arts, and with photography as the emphasis. But then in one of my classes, we got an assignment to do a self-portrait, but not using the normal paints or photographs or what the normal artistic avenues would be, and to use things and put them together. I don't know that they even called it assemblage back then, because it wasn't as big a thing then. We never studied it. And I did a self-portrait using things that I had at home. And it, to me, oh my gosh, I loved it so much. And I had such a good time doing it. And I was able to put things together that meant a lot to me, and yet also do something that other people could relate to, not just me. It wasn't like I was just putting together a little.
Was this in high school or college?
This was college. This was one of my studio art classes.
Mhm.
And I had seen an artist by the name of Joseph Cornell when I was in high school. I had become alerted to him through an article in, it was either Time or Life magazine. He was having a big retrospective show in, I believe it was at the Met. I'm not sure. No.
It was the Met or MoMA. I know the show you're referring to. It sort of made him a public figure.
Yes. Finally, he got the recognition that he deserved, and he was an assemblagist to end all assemblagists. And he has influenced my work from the time that I saw him, his work initially. And that was when it really clicked, when I did that self-portrait. I realized this is something I really enjoy and I think I'm good at. I think that's a struggle for a lot of artists to find which medium is the thing. What is it that you do the best? And I enjoy working with all different media, and that's where assemblage works for me. I can paint, I can do woodwork, I can, there's just all sorts of things that you can do while putting together an assemblage. So that's.
Now, Angela, weren't you a naval officer for a while?
I was in the Air Force.
In the Air Force.
Yes.
So how did your artistic interest meld with being in the Air Force?
I certainly could not do assemblage when I was in the Air Force, but I did carry paints and sketchbooks around with me, and of course my camera. And I was still taking a lot of 35 millimeter photographs. And in those days, things were not digital. It was still, you did it on film.
Did you ever exhibit any of those other works, particularly your photographs?
Yes, they've been exhibited mostly in the Southwest, but they are in some collections. Yeah. Around.
Well, I'd like to take a look at the very fine work that both of you have that we've selected for our conversation. But Angela, I believe you mentioned your father, and your father was an artist. So would you just say a little bit about how that inflected your development?
Okay, well, when we get to a piece that is going to come up, it's called Daddy's Little Girl. I will reflect a little bit more on him and his influence on me, but he was, quite frankly, a genius, and I'm not just being prejudiced there. He was well known, and he started out pretty much as an easel painter, and he loved that. That was his love. He studied at the Pennsylvania Academy, the Chicago College of Fine Arts, and also I looked it up, and he studied at the Academy Julienne in Paris.
Angela and I have talked about this before, and I just want to say for the audience, putting on my art historian's hat, I wrote my dissertation about a group of artists associated with the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts in the late 19th and early 20th century. It is the oldest continuously operating art school in the United States. And the Chicago Art Institute is one of the, let's say top 5, top 10, certainly, art schools in the United States. And the Académie Julienne in Paris is where Americans went who didn't want to really subject themselves to the rigors and the chauvinism of the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. So they were taught by usually very well established and popular French artists in the academic traditions and practices of the École, but without all of the folderol and, being teased or looked down on because the French wasn't perfect. You know how that goes.
He was very young when he was accepted to the Academy, and he had to make a choice of going to the Olympics as a runner. He was in track, or going to Paris to study art. And he made the decision that going to Paris to study art would last longer than going to the Olympics.
Well, and having seen some of his work,
all-around guy.
Yeah, I actually think very much he made the right decision. So Emil, if you don't mind, since we brought up Angela's father, let's go ahead and look at her work, and we can talk about that piece that she just alluded to.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. First slide, please. Okay, I think this is the one that we want. So Angela,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about Daddy and his influence and how you brought this work together. What is here physically that makes the image that you created?
Right. This is probably one of the most straightforward and also one of the most personal works that I have done. That is me and my father when I was about 9 years old in that photograph there. You'll see the little pennant back there that says art. We have a bed of roses down at the bottom, and we have thorns rising up from the roses. There's also a monarch chrysalis. You can see kind of there on the right-hand side of the piece. It's broken open because the butterfly has come out of it, and there's the butterfly up above. Not a monarch, but anyway, close enough. So living with Dad, being the genius that he was, virtually everything he attempted, he did brilliantly. So it's wonderful to be around a person like that, but it's also a struggle because they are so darn good.
Well, did he encourage you? Did he take that skill and knowledge he had and pass some of it on to you to help you develop as an artist?
Oh my gosh, yes, he sure did. And I will never forget, I don't know how people are going to take this, but I was just a kid, so I hadn't had any life classes for drawing. And Dad said, okay, I'll pose for you. But that did not mean that he stripped down naked. But he was in his white boxer shorts and his white t-shirt and standing there and teaching me how to turn the body into ovals, circles, and this many ovals are in the arms, and this many ovals are in the body, and this many circles and ovals are in the legs, and so forth. I'll never forget that. And he drew it for me, and then I had to try to do it looking at him. And it was so hard. It was so hard. And it didn't look a thing like what he had done. But at one moment it was disheartening. At the other moment it was so very encouraging and just lovely that he would do that, and that he really did want me to be an artist. Both of my parents encouraged me every way they could. And oh my gosh, everything I did, they put on the walls of the house. It was just plastered with everything I did. And I just want to say one more thing that is in there, and you might be able to see it down in the right-hand corner, is a little Route 66 token.
I love that.
They used to sell those things at the curio shops and stuff. And Dad worked for the Indian Arts and Crafts Board, which was under the Department of the Interior. And his job as an artist, they hired him because he had artistic ability and was very talented, was to ensure that the Native Americans that he worked with did not get taken advantage of by unscrupulous traders and marketers of their artwork. And he also helped them to use modern equipment to create their artwork. And I was born in Alaska. That was when he was working with the Eskimos up there in the Arctic. And then we moved on to the Southwest, and we also were in Florida. He worked with the Seminole Indians there, and then came back to the Southwest. And when I was a little older, but not in school yet, he would take Mom and me on his business trips all around to the various villages and pueblos in the Southwest. And I remember that so well. And of course, Route 66 played a large part of that. So that's about everything that's in that piece there.
Do you still have this piece, or have you sold it?
I will not sell it.
Yeah,
it is not for sale.
Yeah. Well, that's great, and I can understand why. And you're very fortunate to have such supportive parents. when my parents saw my first art history textbook, my mother said, well, actually, she said when I was taking a full fellowship to do my doctorate, she said, when are you going to have time to go to law school?
Oh,
and when my father saw the art history textbook, he said that it was pagan and vulgar. He had rather stern Christian beliefs. So he didn't think I should even be looking at such things.
wow.
But, you know,
There you are.
yeah, we have to do what we have to do, right? So let's look at the next piece.
This is the Cleavers. I enjoy the language. And so in my titles, a lot of times there will be some kind of a, not exactly a pun, but definitely something using the language that is interesting. And this one, I was thinking about the word cleave, to cleave, and how it has two totally opposite meanings. To cleave is to stick together, to cling together. And then to cleave is to cut in two. So it's to separate and maybe drastically do that. So these are the Cleavers. I imagine that that's the name of this couple, you see. And they have a string there, which is sort of like a rope around them, tying them together. The photograph itself has a very heavy crease in the middle of it. It's not torn, it's just creased. And there's the number 2. There are turtle doves in that little panel there that looks like they're sitting on a rose, a flower, or something like that. The thing in the upper left side there is off of a door. It's like a lock from an old Victorian door or something. And you can't really see it too well, but there is an eye there. So I'm kind of alluding to the idea that things that happen behind closed doors, they do happen in a marriage, and that's a very private thing. And it also, the title, The Cleavers, alludes to, if you remember, Leave It to Beaver. That was the name.
Angela, I love the way you play with those sort of double meanings and suggestions of different ways to approach an image, a thing, a relationship. Chronologically, where does this piece fall in relation to Daddy's Little Girl?
Years later.
Years later? Yeah.
Yes. Daddy's Little Girl was one of the first pieces I did. And when I really first started doing this back in 2007 in earnest, because I had so many other life events that got in the way, but I was still collecting everything all that time. But so 2007 was the year I joined MFA, was the year I got into my first show in MFA. And I've been doing the Assemblage ever since then.
Well, let me ask you a couple of sort of art historical questions then about this. And I do think that it's very clear from the first work to this one that you did evolve from something that's more or less straightforward. It is what it is. And you figure out how the different parts relate to something like this that becomes much more multi-layered and open-ended as to how you interpret it. But I'm curious about the piece of newsprint, which looks like it's a scrap of paper maybe picked up off the ground. Is that what it is?
I believe that is a piece of the dictionary, the page that Cleaver or Cleave is
so you selected it deliberately for that purpose.
Yes, I did. And then I just distressed it. I like to distress things. If they're not already distressed, I will distress them.
Do you pick up distressed things out of the gutter?
What's that?
Do you pick up distressed things out of the gutter and incorporate them?
Not anymore. Not with what's going on in the world. But
Well,
I have found things on the playground that's right behind our house and picked them up and brought them in for sure.
Yeah, because that scrap of paper, obviously you thought much more deliberately about it and why you selected it. But you know, the great 20th century sort of master of assemblage and found objects, Kurt Schwitters, would literally sweep up trash from Berlin and incorporate it into his work.
Love his stuff.
Yeah,
Oh, so good.
Okay, well, we don't want to shortchange Emil, so let's keep going through yours. I could talk about both of your works for a long time, but especially yours because they take time to sort of figure out and parse. So what do we have? Siren Song, which is a very appealing subject to me.
Getting older has been on my mind a lot lately. Like the last 5 years or so, I've been feeling my age and can't really believe how old I am. And this one is kind of like the 3 ages of woman, if you will. A lot of my work does relate to being a woman and to marriage. And because that's kind of what I know. This starts out with the young girl, the lovely young girl, and there's a bird cage there. The reflection on this is a little tough to see those things, but there's a big cage. And I'm not saying she is in that cage or from that cage, but the cage is an indicator of how protected young girls are generally. And then we move into the lady with the manufactured wing. It's like it's just something that was an addition to her, and it was a necessity, perhaps, to be an angel, to be kind, to be always thinking of others. And this is the age where a woman comes into her own reproductive stage and so forth. And then the last portion of this age is a very, very strong woman in the form of Medusa. And of course, we all know what happens to people who diss her. Don't get on my nerves, buddy. You'll turn to stone. I didn't really intend to say that, you know, all women turn out to be something to be feared, but I also wanted to allude to the fact that there's a certain strength that's gained with time, both for women and men. And I think once you get past the reproductive stage, so to speak, you're not worried about those things so much anymore, and you can kind of come fully into your own strength.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm older than either of you, and I think that that's a very thoughtful, provocative and thoughtful way of assembling these different elements to make that point. So I think we have one more of yours. So let's go.
I think that's it.
No, that's it. We did 3 each.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought we had one more. Emil, you're up. See, when I first saw these, Emil, I have to say, as a digital photographer, I did not realize that they were photographs. So can you start, if you don't mind, by telling me a little bit about, tell us all a little bit about what kind of camera you use. You mentioned primarily your cell phone, and then how you develop an image like this.
Right. Yeah, I've got an Olympus Mark II as well for that I use primarily for some wildlife photography, travel photography. This is, the cell phone is handy because the software, the app that I use to manipulate my images is right there. So taking a walk to the park, you know, my daily walk to the park, I've got a lot of shots from that area. I think this, you can go down such a rabbit hole with the digital manipulation of an image that I'm pretty sure that this one originated as a photo of the woods that I walk in every day. And this is an example of one where I just reduce it to some basic pixels, really. I just go step way back until it's unrecognizable, really, but then have some fun with light and shadows and color filters. So,
so are you using the software that is included with most smartphones, or do you download a more robust piece of software so you can have more possibilities?
Yeah, I'll tell you, the two that I use are PixArt and Snapseed for different reasons, but they're both free apps. They're a bit more robust than what comes with the phone, although phones these days. My phone is it's getting up there. It's a source of jokes here that mine is still working. It's
I
probably
can't-
5 years old.
I can't believe the screen on the thing hasn't been completely worn away.
Well, I'm familiar with both of those by name, and I've used Snapseed, so I can see that you've got a lot more possibilities. Can you just explain what you meant by drilling down into the pixels? Does that mean that there's a way that the software sort of pulls the pixels apart and then you can manipulate them?
It doesn't pull them apart, but it just makes it coarser and coarser resolution.
So you get to the point where you're really looking at pixels and not a defined shape.
Right. The original shapes are unrecognizable. However, there's either, some element provided by nature, either the shapes, broad shapes, or colors that I tend to retain.
And the light and dark. Didn't you tell me once that it's the light and dark? You sort of take what was given to you and then perhaps adjust it?
Right. In this case, yeah, I think some of the light and shadows remained.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was from the Winter Members Show. I was happy it got honorable mention in that one. And the juror described this as, one of several pieces in that show that were self-contained worlds. And I liked that description because what I was after is the sort of lighting that falls on a building or in a room and leaves, shadows in some corners and light in others.
Do you think that your scientific training and work pointed you in this direction for the medium of photography, rather than something more like representational?
I think only perhaps in the sense that I got into colored bathymetry contours, which we'll see in another piece here coming up. But I think maybe that had an influence, kind of steered me in this direction. But the other thing contributing to this is just my interest in the geometric shapes that stems from Ukrainian embroidery, Ukrainian Easter eggs, Byzantine iconography.
So maybe it's fair to say that the interest in certain forms and shapes and patterns is something that goes back almost before you can remember, but now you've found an electronic tool to explore that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a very good way of describing it. I think that I was absorbing these ideas from an early age.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and maybe that bathoscopic, is that
Bathymetric?
Bathymetric image is the next one. I can't remember how we set them up. Yeah, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's simulated bathymetry. It's actually the background there with all the contours is from a photo of the clouds, a photo of a cloudy sky, which I then filtered into and got drawing out the layers of clouds that you might not see on an overcast day. It just might look like a gray sky to the casual observer, but there's a lot of layers in there that you can draw out with the filters. And so then added some color filters as well to simulate the bathymetry of an imaginary ocean. That's there for a fleeting moment while the clouds.
For the uninitiated, bathymetrics is looking at the seafloor bottom, right, and all the elevations.
Yeah, nautical charts will contour the depths of the ocean or the body of water that you're on, and so yeah, I've had a chance to look at a lot of the bathymetric contouring from my ocean exploration work. I've been on 11 deep ocean expeditions, exploring the oceans with Robert Ballard's group, the Ocean Exploration Trust.
Well, I think I've said this to you before, but I'm not going to pass up an opportunity to say it again. If you need a deckhand who will swab the heads and whatever, happy to go along with no pay.
Noted. They do occasionally have an artist at sea out there.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm here. I'm raising my hand, but I think this is great, and especially as I think more about it and hear you talk about it, you really turned everything upside down, and in turning it upside down, you allowed us all to see it in a different way and see it from your perspective rather than what we might more familiarly have done. So that's part of what I think we're trying to do as artists, at least I feel like I am, and seems like you are too.
Yeah, and this one's a commentary on sea level rise, 21st century sea level rise scenarios. And so, we're looking at these submerged marine terraces, if you will, that is, we've done that off of Southern California, looked at submerged beaches that were exposed, but then were drowned as sea level rose over the past 18,000 years. And so that's kind of what I was approaching with the imaginary bathymetry, but then superimposed on that are some curves that represent potential scenarios for the rest of this century with sea level rise, sea level versus time.
Right. I read yesterday in the newspaper that iceberg the size of Delaware, should it melt, would raise by itself sea levels around the world by 10 feet. Does that sound right?
That sounds a little extreme,
Yeah.
but an iceberg, once it calves off of a glacier and enters the ocean, it has done its part to raise sea level, because
Okay.
just like Archimedes, discovering
Yeah.
that when you enter the tub, you're displacing water. That's what an iceberg does. But that's where most of our sea level rise is coming from, icebergs and glacial melt.
Well, you'll have a lot of new coastlines to explore.
Yeah, I think we're going to be submerging some in the decades.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's go on and see your last piece, and then we'll wrap up.
Hello, Spot.
Yeah. Here's Spot. Spot likes to be part of the program.
That's great.
Spot, this is where I walk my dogs.
Yeah. Well, this one, I know you and I've talked about it before, and I really am impressed by this. I think this is a terrific way that you've utilized, sort of merged together a more traditional approach to landscape photography with using your digital tools to enhance that. So could you kind of walk through what it is, where it came from, how you created the image we're looking at now?
Oh, yeah. So on these daily walks to the park, the light is always different. And on this particular day, there was just some really brilliant lighting. It's kind of toned down here because I use some filters that make it more pastel in appearance, and have smoothed some things. So the young pines that are in the clearing are in the background there, and it's just represented by some hints of light green there. In the foreground is just some ivy growing on the floor of the woods there. I just thought that the tree branches, it's a nice mix of deciduous and coniferous trees there, and they framed that clearing so nicely. I had to try to capture that. And so this is just kind of showing the effect of impressionism on me. Going for a feel here, a mood.
Well, I think it has a wonderful mood to it, a peaceful mood, but a very strong, though not obvious, composition. So this really pulls together a lot of the elements that I look for when I'm evaluating a work of art, different levels that when an artist can master and control them all, I think I'm very impressed by that. So this is one of all the things of yours that I've seen, I think this might be the one that I personally appreciate the most. So keep at it. I'm looking for more of all of it, but I'm looking for more from Angela too. And as I said, really appreciate you sitting down so that we can talk about your work. And I think you're both doing wonderful things, and look forward to seeing more of it. So
thanks. And I've got a piece coming up in Small Wonders. So
me too. So I'll see you at the reception, if not sooner.
Great. See you then.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you, Will.
Great talking to you, Will. Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.